When a fisherman chooses his career, he knows that there are certain risks that come with the job. Drowning, dehydration, and animal attacks are always possible. But with the right amount of planning and the know-how to escape such events, a fisherman can make a good living from their trade. If successful, they can make a good amount of money, provide for their community, and earn a decent name for themselves as they help others. However, if something goes wrong, they must be able to rely on their abilities to survive, or else the consequences can be life-changing. With many different species of sharks reportedly swimming in the waters of Jamaica, the fishermen of the island knew to keep their wits about them while they swam, for fear that something could be watching them. This is exactly what Audley Lewis came to discover in 2019, when he faced one of the most fearsome sharks in the sea. 61-year-old Audley had been a fisherman in Jamaica for 40 years by 2019 and was well respected within the community. He had been nicknamed Ugly by his friends, but he didn't mind it. He was just happy to be with friends. He had always dreamed of becoming a soldier when he was a child, but following the discovery of a knee problem, he was told that this would never be possible. Instead, he began his lifelong career as a fisherman and never looked back. He was happy with his work and knew that he was the best of his friends, which made him glow with pride every day. His profession did not come without risks, and he had been attacked by sharks in the past, 5 times in fact, but had miraculously always escaped with only minor injuries. He was always prepared, as he knew what lay under the waves and was regularly armed with a fishing gun and a knife, just in case something dared to test him that day. Unfortunately for him, on the day of his most recent attack, he would only have a broken bread knife in hand, which he would have to use against an 18-foot tiger shark. That day, Audley dived down to 75 feet to his usual conch hunting spot. He always knew the best places to catch the sought-after animal. He was joined by 2 friends who would help him collect the conch and bring them back to the boat, which was left anchored just above where they were diving. While they were collecting their haul, they suddenly spotted a large turtle swimming past them. They were mesmerized by the creature and watched as it gracefully but swiftly swam straight past them. They noticed that it seemed to be swimming much faster than usual and wondered what could be causing it to hurry, but thought it was maybe hunting. Something caught Audley's eye, and as he turned to look, he was met with a terrifying sight and finally realized why the turtle was swimming with such speed. An 18-foot tiger shark had him in its sights and was swimming straight for him. He was dwarfed by the size of this animal and knew he had to think quickly to escape, especially as he was armed with only a butter knife. He was too deep down to reach the surface, and even if speed was not an issue, if he resurfaced too quickly, then he would die from the bends instead. He was stuck. The only thing he could do as the shark prepared to grab him was create a barrier, which is where the bag of conches came in handy for him. As the shark opened its jaws, Audley was able to shove the bag in the way instead, causing the shark to bite into his bag instead of his flesh. It began to devour the contents of the bag, distracting it from Audley for a short time so that he could try to safely resurface. He didn't have much time. He managed to create a little distance while the shark was eating, but as soon as it finished, it spotted Audley again and began the pursuit. It was clear that the shark would not be satisfied by just a few conches. It was hungry for humans. Audley watched in fear as the animal turned and began to speed towards him, while he waited like a sitting duck. He tried in vain to stab the animal with his butter knife when it got close enough, but it was small and blunt, unable to even pierce the animal's leathery skin. As he continued to try and fight, the shark bit down on his left hand and began to saw at it with its jagged teeth. Even underwater, he could hear his bone crack and break as it was ripped off by this giant fish and torn from his body. He watched as it swam away with his hand, chewing and gnawing at it as it went, its prize claimed. The group took their chance and grabbed onto Audley, horrified by what they had seen, and dragged him back to the surface while he tried to explain to himself what had happened and how he no longer had a hand. The shark had also punctured his oxygen compressor, so if his friends couldn't get him to the surface soon, he would drown before the blood loss even took effect. They took turns sharing their air with Audley as they pulled him upwards, hoping that he would soon be saved now that the shark had claimed its prize and left them. They finally broke through the surface, and the other men pulled themselves onto the boat before they began to try and help Audley back out of the water. As they readied themselves to pull him up, they made a mistake. They grabbed him by his severed hand, causing him to slip through their fingers and back into the water. Audley felt himself crash into something as he hit the water, and when he turned, found that he had fallen straight back onto the shark as it was swimming back up to grab him and finish the job. He was determined to survive and began to kick and punch the shark, fighting for his life. Miraculously, while he was kicking the shark, Audley was able to push himself upwards from the shark and out of the water into the arms of his fellow fisherman, who finally dragged him back into the boat. He lay on the floor of the boat and looked to the sky, thankful that he was able to escape from the jaws of the shark that came back for a second bite. Now that he was out of the water, Audley had to focus on surviving until he reached land. They were about 15 miles away from the shore, and the waves were getting bigger, reducing their chances of getting him back in time. He was suffering badly from shock and blood loss, so his group had to work hard to not only keep the boat afloat, but also keep their friend conscious. They tied up his arm to stop him from bleeding too much, and one man stayed with him at all times to ensure that he wouldn't pass out. Against all odds, he was able to make it back to land and was quickly taken to the hospital, where he was slowly nursed back to health. He was thankful to his friends for their quick thinking and for being so committed to keeping him alive. He would never forget the feeling of the shark's teeth gnawing away at his arm, and would now have to adapt to his life with a missing limb. Following the attack, Audley needed to relearn how to live his life with just one hand, and would now have to heavily rely on his family. He had always been the provider, but those days were now behind him as he struggled with his new place in the family. He wasn't able to work anymore. The attack changed his life, and he would never fish again. He would sometimes enter the water for a swim, but would never go too deep again, knowing what might be lurking in the depths for him. He is now in good health and is grateful for what was done for him, but he knows exactly what he has lost. It can be difficult to adapt to a new life with a new disability, but he states that he remains happy, although he would rather stay out of the water from now on. The shark responsible was never found, and while it is irrational to think that a shark would continue stalking its prey years later, it is better to be safe than sorry. The memory of that day constantly replays in his mind every time he looks at his missing hand, the day he narrowly escaped his terrifying final affliction.